Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of anxiety and mental health struggles, health-related anxiety, and personal stories of stress and overwhelm. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have a very special guest today here with me. It's Megan DeVito. She is a life coach on a mission to help women break free from the overwhelm and overthinking that comes from anxiety. After a 30-year battle with anxiety, she discovered the power of slowing down, trusting her body instead of her thoughts, and incorporating intentional fun, and she is helping others learn to do the same. Ready to ditch the anxiety so you feel calm, confident, and have more fun? Megan's coaching approach, founded in scientific evidence and fueled by personal and client successes, is guiding ambitious women towards a more joyful and fulfilling life. As the host of More Than Anxiety podcast, she shares practical strategies, honest conversations, and inspiring stories, all with a touch of humor to empower listeners to take control of their lives. Megan's passion for inspiring others has led her to speak at various events and to be featured on podcasts across the globe. Welcome, Megan. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for coming on. I think this is
Thanks for
a
having me.
topic. Yeah, sure. I think this is a topic that a lot of people can relate to right now.
hmm
And in general, I think anxiety is creeping up to probably an epic high, I would guess, because
Yeah.
of the world we live in, right? And there's just a
hmm
lot going on. There's a lot of stress and stuff. I would love for you to start by sharing your personal journey with anxiety. 30 years is a long time. So,
Really long time.
yeah.
It's a really long time. And I've spent I've spent a lot of time looking back over those 30 years to be like, what was the thing? And
Mm,
honestly, I don't know. So I guess that in the middle of that, I'd like it to start at the beginning of my story, really. In about third grade, I remember feeling I didn't feel good and I wanted to go lay down. And mostly I just wanted to go home. I think I
mhm.
was just like, I probably just didn't want to be at school, whatever it was. I was a good student. I didn't get in trouble. It was nothing like that. But I really wanted to be at home with my mom and
Mm,
dad. So I would ask just to go lay in the sick room. And I went to this little tiny school. I live in the Northeast Indiana. I went to this little teeny school. And there was this dark, like sick room. And there was a cot in there because I could just go take a nap, except
yeah.
for I just wanted to leave. And so I remember one time a note, like a sticky note, fell off of one of my papers and it said, always sick. And I
Oh.
was like, that was mean. And I was like, not very nice. And part of me was like, oh, maybe I am always sick. But whatever it was that clicked, I think there were some little things that had nothing to do really with my family. One of my good friends, her parents got divorced and she moved like a couple of hours away. And maybe that was it. I don't know. But whatever it was, it started out as probably me being a sensitive kid and really turned into me being a really anxious adult.
Mm,
So what started out as me having a stomach ache turned into health anxiety. And I got to middle school and I was a wreck, and then high school and college, all of that. It just kept building and
mhm.
building. And I just thought it was the way I was going to be, which is, it's a miserable way to be. 30 years of jokingly now saying I have had every disease under the sun and absolutely none of them. Yeah, so like really thinking like, oh my God, I'm dying all the time. But
Mhm.
then actually having this little part of me that was like, why are you being so like ridiculous? You're not. But fast forward to I was almost 40
Mhm.
and I was taking a walk outside listening to an audiobook. And it was like this one moment in time where I think I was starting to get in a good groove. Like I'd been walking, honestly, because I had 4 kids at home at that point. So I was like, I'm going to need a break. So I would go walk. And then I would come home and be like, yeah, I took a walk. Now I can have like cookies and stuff at night. So I was like walking for cookies and to have some time to myself and really just to be in this place where I'm listening to this audiobook. And there was this quote, and this book had nothing to do with anxiety, but they said, worry is wishing for what you don't want. And I was like, why would anyone do that? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's what I've been doing. Like,
oh no.
Yeah. I think it was when you just hear that thing and it just hits you differently. And you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
That's what happened. And so I was like, you mean I don't have to buy into these thoughts? I don't think it had ever occurred to me, even though there was part of me that knew a lot of what I was worried about was just stupid.
Yeah.
I don't think it had ever hit me that, oh, I actually don't have to do that. And so even when I would feel really anxious, I could cut off that downward spiral to be like, oh, I know what this is. And so there was something really powerful for me about hearing that I didn't have to believe my thoughts, but then also realizing that when I felt that way, which we all know that anxiety feels awful, right? Like we don't want to feel it, but it was like, oh, but I don't really have to do anything with that. Like when I think I don't have to do that. And it was just like, it went and it shrunk down. And it was literally in that one moment, everything changed. Now, did it take a while for me to practice? Of course. Do I still feel anxious sometimes? Yeah, because I'm human. Yeah. But not to the point where I was in this place of really disordered, crazy anxiety all the time. I haven't taken medicine for 2 years. I finally would get down to where I was taking like 2.5 milligrams. And somebody's like, why do you even bother? And I'm like, safety net.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so stupid. Like I had to split it down to the point where I was like, I'm just still taking like this like quarter of a pill. And I was like, this is so dumb. So I finally ended up getting rid of it. And yeah, it all coincided with me trying to find a way out of my teaching job and to find out what I really wanted to do, which just rolled me into coaching.
Ah, interesting. So what did the anxiety look like for you? Was it a physical response? Was it all mental? What did it look like for you? And was it like all the time, or was it anxiety attacks, panic attacks, anything like that?
That's a really good question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before. I like that because it is some people are so fixated on how their body feels, like physically anxious. Other people are more that mentally anxious. And I think for me, mine probably was more mental because maybe let me circle back on this because so I would say for me personally, mine was probably more mental and really thinking about all of these scary things that like scary diseases or things that I thought was wrong with me. Right. Yes. And the feelings in your body are often what drive those thoughts. If you feel anxious and your brain does its thing and starts to try and figure out why, because there's all of the adrenaline and the cortisol and all those things going through your body, then whatever it is that you think becomes the problem, which is really a non-problem. So for me, if I felt anxious, I would start thinking of all the things I thought was wrong with me because I had physical symptoms of anxiety. So I'd be like, oh, that feeling is probably like liver failure.
Oh gosh.
You know,
so what type of
moment, you know,
were you
like it's normal anxiety symptoms, really normal anxiety symptoms. Or if I would have something where, let's say that you have a sore muscle or something like that. And it's almost like your brain misreads your body. So it's, oh, you feel that. Most people would be like, yeah, I worked out too hard or something, where someone else might go completely off the deep. Like me, I would go down to be like, oh, obviously there's a huge tumor or something like that.
Oh gosh.
And I was like, I'm trying to explain it to my mom one time. And I was like, I just want you to understand it's like anything that you feel in your body, it's almost like your brain just misreads it and turns it into a catastrophe. Even though there's a really quiet whispering part of you that's utter bullshit. None of it's true. Yeah. If I circle back to that though, for other people who have that feeling of anxiety in their bodies, they would be like, oh no, I feel anxious. I think I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm afraid I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm afraid I'm going to, what if I'm going crazy? Where that would still be about the thoughts, but again,
Right.
about how you feel. Really, it's that back and forth of, I have anxiety in my body, and then the thinking becomes a symptom of the feeling.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause whenever I think of anxiety and anxiety for me, I have a full physical response. So if I'm
Oh yeah, 100%.
nervous about something, and a lot of it is I'm non-confrontational, so I end up in
Mhm.
social situations that I'm uncomfortable with. That's usually when I notice it the most. I
Mhm.
get like sweaty, my heart
Yep.
starts beating faster. I feel like I don't know. Those are the two main things for me as I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sweaty right now and my heart is pounding and I have this weird feeling in my stomach. So
Mhm.
if you had some of those symptoms, you would just automatically go to the absolute worst case possible scenario in your brain of
Mhm.
something's wrong with me and try to figure
In the
out
past,
what it
yeah.
was. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And whatever it is. And so anxiety is funny when you think about what it is that we all have the same similar ish, like really similar feelings, right? Like for me, it would always start, I got really good to where I could be like, oh, I can tell as soon as it's starting because I knew my fingertips would tingle.
Oh.
So I would be like, okay, it's starting. And then I would know. So I would know that I would just have this unease inside, like I don't know what to call it other than unease. I didn't really get the sweaty part of it, but I definitely the rapid heart rate. But a lot of people do. A lot of people will say my throat feels like it's closing. I feel like I can't swallow.
Mm.
Stomach trouble. Some people are like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Other people feel like they need to run to the bathroom. But we do have like that, if you kind of have like textbook anxiety symptoms, but it's really what your brain thinks in that moment. And that's just like that little teeny part of your brain that's, hey, let me show you this charcuterie board of crap that it could be that like, here's the list of things that you can be afraid about. And for some people, it's all about social situations.
Yeah.
Same feelings, but their thing where they're really being critical of themselves or where they learned this isn't a safe thing for you would be someone's going to laugh at you or someone's going to look at you funny or they think you're an idiot. And maybe that came from like recess one day in like
Yeah.
a blip in your radar, wherever that came from, whatever that teeny tiny little trauma or whatever you want to call it happened, you developed this thought about yourself. And so
Yeah.
anytime you feel that, it's just a memory coming back to the surface. For me, it happened to be about my health, which actually, as I dug into it more, as I really spent time thinking, it was never, ever actually about me, my health. It was
Okay.
always about me making someone else sad. I would never want anyone to be
Oh.
sad for me or sad. Like it was always very much if I got sick, if something happened to me, my mom would be so sad. My dad would be so sad. My kids would be so sad. My husband would be so sad. And it was always me trying to protect everyone else's feelings.
Oh,
Such an oldest
wow.
daughter thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
super interesting.
yeah. So when you get into it, it's like, what was actually going on there that I couldn't handle? Could I handle most of it? Sure. But it was always that's the way it would come back. And for other people, maybe I don't want to be trapped anywhere. There's so many different ways that our brains try to protect us, but it's
Yeah.
always, oh, there's that feeling. Obviously, something's wrong. Make up some stories.
Yeah, that for me, it's people being mad at me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. If somebody texts me something and it seems like they're about to be mad at me, or I have to text something or have a conversation that could be confrontational, even though I'm trying like my hardest to not make it that way. And then my brain just goes to the worst case scenarios possible of this person's mad at you because of blah, blah, blah. And I'll probably make something up in my head of what I
Mhm.
did, even though I
Mhm.
probably didn't do anything. And maybe it has nothing to do with me. Like
Right.
it's a spiral. So it's interesting to me because that's how I've always experienced it to hear somebody talk about experiencing
Mhm.
it with your health.
Mhm.
Did you go to the doctor a lot then? Did you try to seek medical help for all of that?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I did not go to the doctor every time I thought something was wrong with me. I called this is so ridiculous. Okay, so when I was in college, when I was like, that was really, if I thought of a period of my life that was the hardest, it
Mhm.
was college. I was a basket case. Like you asked if I had like anxiety attacks and if it would come and go. I remember so many more times when I was anxious because I think that they were so hard. It was not 24/7. right? It wasn't like I woke up anxious and it was there. It was like I would get stuck in this place where, for whatever reason, I would go through periods of time where I was incredibly anxious, and then I would be okay for a while.
Okay.
And by a while, I'd be really anxious for a couple of weeks and then be okay for a week, and then be really anxious for a month and be okay for a couple of weeks. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Probably tied to hormones, probably tied to all kinds of things at that point. Terrible eating habits, probably drinking too much and doing all those things in college that college kids did, not sleeping.
All of
the things that would
that.
right, but certainly not when I was in third grade, right? Like at some point it was a learned response to how I felt.
Yeah. And all of those other things just probably made it worse.
100%. And I was away at college.
Mm-hmm.
And if I go back to my worst thing was like, I wanted to be at home.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, bananas, apparently. I don't know what. So so whatever that whole period was there, it was just me trying to figure out how to navigate it. And and I don't even remember where I started with this question. Where did we start with that? College was rough and it was trying to figure that out. And then I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I don't remember. We just got off on a tangent. And
what the heck? Yeah, it'll come back.
Oh, we were talking about you seeking medical help.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yes. Seeking medical help, not for every little thought, because it had gone on for years. When I was little, my parents, one of my good friends and my parents' friends was my doctor, actually. And I think I had medicine for stomach aches when I was little or an upset stomach. But I'm 49 years old. This was like the early 80s. No one's talking about mental health.
No, absolutely not.
We weren't, we should talk about going to therapy or getting anything like that. It was just like, you're fine here. It's fine. I did not. My mom always was like, no, you had stomach aches. We took you to the doctor. Doctor said everything's fine. At one point, I went to therapy for a really short amount of time in college, and it was a terrible experience.
Oh, no.
No, only because I just remember them, not because anything bad happened. It was just one of those things where I don't know that I was ready for it. And we got in there and it was like, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice breathing. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And it was like, and we'll probably work up to some exposure stuff. And I was like, no, we will not.
Yeah.
And so I went for a little bit. I'm like, I'm not doing that. The only time I remember, like I've had one time after my youngest daughter was born where it was definitely postpartum anxiety, and I developed like twitches in my thumbs, which was basically from a stressed out nervous system. Anytime I get sick or you have anything going on like that, your body can develop these little muscle spasms. But I had it for a long time and I slipped. First of all, I Googled it, which was a terrible idea. And so I did go to the doctor for that. And it was like, hey, look, something is wrong with me. And they checked everything out. I had a battery of tests. They're like, oh, that's weird. And literally nothing was wrong.
Oh, wow. So how would that make you feel when they would tell you that? Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radientresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon.
It was actually one of those things where it was good. It was like, I believed if a doctor told me that, I would believe it. I know where I was going now. When I was in college, my go-to plan was never go to the doctor. It was call my dad.
Okay.
I'm like, what is happening here? Sorry.
Okay.
I would call my dad and just say, do you think I'm crazy? Just tell me I'm crazy. And he's, yeah, 100%. I think you're going crazy right now. Nothing's wrong, which always felt really good to me that he would just say, yeah, Megan, everything's fine. Nothing's going on and it's not a big deal. So I did not know, to answer your question. Yeah. And he would just tell me everything was okay. And that
That would calm you down. That's good. So
yeah, that was it.
did you have really good health insurance? That's my
Yeah, the
question
funny
too.
thing is, like, I didn't necessarily have to use it because even
Oh
though I
yeah.
was feeling that way, I didn't go to the doctor for it,
Okay.
right? I didn't really go to therapy. I didn't really need to go to the doctor all the time. I would go if I had something where it was like, go get it. Like sometimes my mom would say, go get it checked. And then I would go
Yeah.
get it checked. But I wasn't one of those people where I was so sensitive. I didn't think I was having a heart attack. Whereas a lot
Okay.
of people who think that they're in a place where, okay, I'm having a heart attack, I'm going crazy, they'll go
Mhm.
to the ER on repeat.
Oh
And
yeah.
mine wasn't like that because mine was so much more, I guess I would call it broad,
Hmm.
that it would be like if they go in and they test me for whatever, or they do all this stuff, I would trust the doctor to say, you do not have this thing. And here are all the reasons you don't have it. And I'd be like, oh, okay, that's fine. So there was something about
Okay.
knowing that like medical side of it that didn't make me have to go. So I wasn't like one of those people that wound up in the ER every
Okay.
Friday night or something like that at all. No, I just
Yeah.
cried a lot.
Oh.
No. Yeah, I just cried a lot. And but that was it. It wasn't, yeah. For health anxiety, you would think that people would go to the hospital a lot, but it's the different than that imminent danger thing.
Okay. So was there something specific that triggered you mentioned the podcast, but, or was it, oh no, it was the
Oh, it was
audio
an
you
audiobook.
were
Yeah.
listening to. So that's what kind of triggered you being like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. How are you feeling then? That's just such an enlightening thing to come to and then have to
Yeah.
be like, okay, now I have to work on this.
That's, yeah. I think that as time goes by and you look back and you're trying to put everything in order to be like, okay, what was the actual order? I know that I was still in a place where I was feeling anxious, maybe not as often as I had in the past. I was definitely taking medication. I had taken medication on and off since high school. I guess maybe even whatever the heck it was they gave me in third grade, the thing for that, which
Oh yeah.
I don't,
You,
I still don't
that
even know
was
what that was,
stomach
or if it
problems?
worked. Because if I felt sick and wanted to come home, it was always, I would say that my stomach didn't feel good. It could have been like a Smartie. I don't know what it was, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But in high school, I did take medication. It was the wrong medication for me. I found
No.
a medication later that worked better. And I took it on and off for a very long time. I would take it. And then when I would have one of my kids, I was like, absolutely, I will not take medication while I was pregnant. So on and off of that, but really got to a place where I was feeling good. And I know I told you I was taking walks later in the evening just to have
Yeah.
some time, really just to trying to get into a better habit, I think probably of exercising, and getting out of my house a little bit because
Yeah.
I was a stay-at-home mom or a part-time teacher. So teaching part-time and then home the rest of the time. So really maybe accidentally falling into it is the best way to describe it,
Mm.
where, okay, I am walking more. I am doing these things and just listening to a different kind of book, maybe. Maybe I'd never listened
Yeah.
to an actual self-help book before. Okay, in all honesty, what I listened to was You Are a Badass. It's all about manifestation, which I knew nothing about, but it didn't
Yeah.
click for me for manifestation. It was more
Mm.
like this idea that your brain goes wild and here's what happens. And I don't think, even though I had taken psychology courses and classes and graduated from college and taken all of these different things, it was like, why did that never click before? That this was
Mm.
actually like brain science 101. Like when you feel anxious, there's this really primitive part of your brain that will just squirt out a ton of
Mm.
cortisol and adrenaline and make you feel this way. And then you're not allowed to believe anything that you think until that feeling goes away.
Oh,
Period. If somebody
yeah.
would have told me that when I was like 8 years old or 9 years old, that would have been great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have saved
Like,
you a lot of heartache.
yeah. And I really, yeah. And so I do think along the line when I'm thinking about what was the thing in that moment, I really feel like I had maybe calmed down enough at that point for that just to hit the right way and
Mhm.
to flip a switch. But even for every client that I've ever worked with, we're always on a session and they'll be like, oh, wait a minute. And I'm like, there we go. That's what I've been waiting for. Because it's
Yeah.
that moment. People think it's going to be some like, and then 5 years later, I was doing this. And I'm like, but not really. Like,
Yeah.
yes, it takes time to heal your nervous system and to like really recreate those habits that you've had. But that change happens in one moment. It is
Mhm.
one realization and it flies in out of nowhere. I literally can tell you where I stopped on the road and was like, shut up. No way.
Yeah. It was that
Yeah,
memorable. Yeah.
it really was. And it was so piddly, right? Like it wasn't some major thing where someone was like, and this is what caused it and blah, blah, blah. It was just this one thought.
But I think you have to be open to receiving that too. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you're not, you have to get to that point in your journey too. I think obviously the people you work with are already beginning that journey by contacting you and starting that with you. And then they have to work through the stuff. And then eventually it just is the right time and it happens.
Mhm.
That's got to be so amazing to see and witness in your clients.
It is. I'm always like, hold on, say it again.
Yeah.
Like they do. And it is funny because for some people, it comes in the first 2 or 3 weeks. And for other people, we get to the last 2 or 3 weeks and they're finally like, oh my gosh, I just figured it out. And I'm like, perfect. Like
Oh,
whenever it hits for them
wow.
is right. Because if you're like me, I had a really normal, very vanilla, sweet little middle class white girl childhood. Nothing dreamy, the kind of stuff that people would not even make TV about because it was so average and normal and good.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
So there wasn't like a specific traumatic event that
no,
triggered anxiety and then that
no.
triggered you in the future and all of that. It was just in your DNA.
And it's one of those things where I look back and I'm like, oh. So surely, like when I told you that, yes, I have like the sensitive nervous system thing, but a lot of people have that don't end up
Yeah.
anxious. My son was like has ADHD, and I'm like, potentially, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell now because I have all the weird hormone brain stuff.
Ugh, yeah.
But where I'm like, I don't know if it's ADHD or just where I am in life. But
Yeah.
so for whatever it was that got me to where I was, I could spend forever trying to figure that out, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to know.
Yeah.
And there's something about that is frustrating,
Yeah.
but there's also part of it that I'm like, does it really matter? No, not really.
That's true, but I'm the type of person for sure that would want an answer to that. I'm like, I am
Right.
not going to be able to fix this until I know where this came from and what caused it. And then I can heal
Yeah.
that part, and then that will heal this part.
Yeah,
But
and that would
yeah,
make sense, right? But it's not really that way. And so many people are like, but why? And for me, I have actually found out the more that I sit in that place, I can tell sometimes if I'm in a funk or if I'm in a place where I'm learning a lot of new things at once,
Mhm.
which are two very opposite things. One is I've got so many great ideas. I want to learn more about this and learn more about this. And I'll find myself going down a rabbit hole with myself because I like to try all my coaching things out on myself.
Yeah,
And I'm
sure.
like
Mm,
too deep. And so we want to get to the why. We want to get to this, tell me the thing that hurt you.
yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know.
But I
And
think you're
so,
right. There's something to be said about it. Doesn't in some cases, if there is a big traumatic thing, absolutely you're gonna
right,
have to heal that part of it before you can heal the
right.
anxiety from it. But at the end of the day, as long as you're working on fixing the anxiety, it really doesn't matter if you can't
It
find
does not
something.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a whole episode on why does not matter for my podcast. I'm like, why
Mm,
doesn't matter? Unless you have something where you were in like a really like your house burned down, you were in a horrible accident, you were abused. If you had something like that, yes, it matters. But if you are just this other thing, we can spend a whole lot of time going into some rabbit holes that we don't know. And I can really make it frustrating for people too, is that if you think about memories and you think about the way your brain works, every time you go back and think of something, your brain remembers it differently,
mm.
which drives me nuts.
That's like the telephone game. That's what I just immediately
It's
thought of. And that is
horrifying to
like,
me.
oh no, because then you're not remembering things as accurately as,
Nothing,
oh wow.
literally nothing. which really frustrating. Tell me again that I don't remember the day my baby was born exactly the way it was. And they're like, no, you don't.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
wow.
and the reason we know that's true is because we could go to, let's say you go to Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, and you're sitting around the table and somebody says, oh my gosh, remember the time this happened? And so did this. I know exactly where they were sitting. They were wearing a red shirt. And they're like, no, I was there. That's not it at all. This is what happened.
Yeah.
Neither one of them are wrong. It's just that they thought about it a few times and just those subtle twists in memory.
Wow.
I know, isn't it frustrating? So the
Yes.
more time you spend going back to try to rationally think about it, your brain is so creative and the way it stores memories, it's, oh, but it could have been this way. You could make things so much worse and you can make things so much different. And that's why even if we look at people who have been arrested and they ask them the same questions, remember back to that and their answers changed. Of course they changed.
Oh, yeah. Because they're not remembering
Yeah.
it the same.
Not because they're
Wow.
trying, but because, and the thing is, you don't even know it. You don't even know what's real. It's so crazy.
That is
So
crazy.
I had to shut myself off on it because there's no reason to. I can
Hmm.
invent, who knows what's real and what's not anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I would just say, don't go there.
That's crazy. So
Maybe
you
with
were,
a therapist to unpack stuff, definitely, but it's not worth it.
and like you said, if there was a traumatic event like that, then
Hmm.
I don't know. I guess you have more experiences with this than I do, but do you find with the people that you work with, if they do have a traumatic event, you can usually figure out the triggers and stuff like that? Or is it still their anxiety is just all over the board? Or do the triggers of their
Um,
anxiety coincide with the trauma?
mm. So if I am working with somebody who has a substantial trauma that happened in their life, right? Like not a lot of those little things like your friend's parents got divorced or whatever. But if they have something big, a lot of times I will say, hey, yes, we can work together. Yes, we can do coaching. Yes, I can help you. And for this particular event, this thing that you told me about, I really am going to recommend that you work with a therapist
Okay.
because I can help you with the habits. I can help you with the emotions. I can help you with all of that. But when it comes to unpacking something that happened to you or in your life, I'm like, I don't want to trigger somebody to make them spiral out
Mhm.
because therapy is so good at that. And they have a
Yeah.
lot of different resources, whether it's EMDR or anything else that they can really do to help people work through that. Now, there is a lot of cognitive behavioral stuff in coaching, but we're moving forward. So for me to say, hey, let's go back and revisit this
Ah,
past thing that hurt you really badly, I'm like, this is therapy. And right now I'm looking out what's going the other way.
okay.
We're headed that direction. Yes, we might have to talk about some of those things. Okay, when's the first time you remember thinking that way? And they might say, oh, this happened. And I'd be like, okay, are you okay? And if they're like, yeah, no problem, then we just keep going. But the cool thing about coaching, a lot of it is that we don't have to go back and talk about that traumatic stuff.
Yeah.
If they've already processed through that with someone, whether it was on their own or in therapy, because some people can have a really traumatic event and not have it be stuck. It's
Yeah.
not like a memory that's hanging on their nervous system all over. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I picture little Polaroid pictures, clothespin all over your nervous system, all over your body,
Oh,
because
okay.
that's really memories are stored all
Yeah.
over in there. If they don't have that picture stored in their nervous system, then they're not going to react to it.
Yeah. Interesting. So you typically work with people either after they've worked through some of that or maybe at the same time they're working through that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in conjunction with the therapist too.
Yeah.
So I have some clients who they go to therapy. And if they have a release of information on file, I'll be like, hey, what did you work on with your therapist? And they're like,
Yeah.
can you call my therapist? And I'm like, if you want me to, I can. But yeah, just to be able to say, this is what you're working through. This is what we're going to talk about. And this is what we're not going to talk about.
Yeah.
So what do we have to do to believe that you could accomplish this thing that you want to work towards?
Mhm.
Like, what'd you learn in therapy? How can we use that? So we
Yeah.
just create those habits. Or we're really working on ways for them to calm down enough to be able to do whatever it is that they're working on in therapy
Mm.
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had your anxiety around health related stuff. Mine is
Hmm.
social. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, after you started working with more and more people, have you found similar things that people are
Hmm.
anxious about, or is it all different, or what different types of, just for people who are listening who
Hmm.
may not be aware that they have anxiety around certain things, maybe this will be enlightening for them.
hmm Yeah, there are certain things that people do that we don't think that they're necessarily anxiety related. And this is a really frustrating part of coaching is that you're always like, oh crap, I didn't realize that was an anxiety thing. It is funny, some of the things that we do, constantly apologizing and then letting other people have their way is an anxiety thing because we don't want to hold the boundary. We don't want to, whether it's we don't want to upset anybody, we don't want anybody to think that we're being rude or pushy. And I don't mean anxiety necessarily in the sense of you have an anxiety disorder. I'm
Right.
saying it makes you feel anxious. And
Yeah.
there's a big
Yeah.
difference between feeling anxious and feeling uncomfortable and then getting to the point where you're like, it's okay for me to say no. It's going to feel icky for a second, but I can do that. And that's
Mm.
normal, right? That's normal life. Ah, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So moving from a place where I have to say yes, oh my God,
Mm.
to it's fine. It makes me feel uncomfortable for a minute. That's where we want to go.
Okay.
Because we don't want to say anxiety is just an emotion.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a lot of emotions at once. So that's one. Always feeling like you can't go fast enough.
Okay. Elaborate a little bit
Yeah.
more on that.
Yeah. Trying to multitask everything,
Ah.
which is not specific to anxiety, right? That could be your personality, that could be ADHD, that could be all kinds of things. But if you're doing it because you feel like you can't slow down
Mm.
because you're trying to avoid something,
Okay.
like I have to go fast because if I don't get it done, then I'll feel something will happen. That's really common for anxiety.
Is that
Um,
are people that are like that, are they afraid to sit in the quiet because there's something else there they don't
a
want to
lot of
deal with?
times, if I
Hmm.
keep up and I keep moving and I keep busy, then I don't have to deal with
Yeah.
whatever it is, whether it's thinking there's things that I should be doing, that I'm supposed to be doing more things. I wasn't productive enough. Whenever I sit still, my brain runs wild and I don't know what to do with the thoughts. Like I worry about what happens when my kids leave the house. I worry about my job. I worry about what side
Yeah.
eye happened at the grocery store, whatever it is, wherever their brain goes, wherever that weakness is, wherever it's like a hole there, something's going to sneak through, whatever they plug that hole with, they'll be like, oh, I couldn't sit down and watch TV with my husband because when I sit down, I just get so anxious. And
Hmm.
it's interesting because the behaviors are often similar.
Okay.
It's always the thoughts that are so different and specific. But again, they come back to some really, I would say, like common themes, whether it's I can't tell people yes or I can't tell people no. I can't say yes to the things that I want to do, but I can't say no to the things I don't want to do.
Mm.
So that's a common one. I have to keep trying or I have to keep doing it because it's not perfect yet.
Ah,
It's not
perfection.
good enough.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we'll see a lot of it's not good enough. What will people think of me? I should be doing this. If you are shoulding on yourself all the
Hmm.
time, I know I should. Who said that?
Yeah.
Who said should? Whose
Yeah.
voice are you hearing when you say that? Or any other of those little thoughts. But I would say, yeah, a lot of times. And then we always have the nail biters and you have the people who you can tell that they're anxious because they're doing whatever they do.
I'm a massive fidgeter and
Yep.
picker.
The knee bobbers.
I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not necessarily like I've never really been a nail biter, but I pick the cuticles on my
Yeah.
fingers. I'll pick my lips.
Yeah.
I'm really bad. My husband's always stop, Johnny. And honestly, I've tried to figure out if it's an anxious thing, a nervous thing,
hmm
but I find a lot of the times for me, anyways, maybe
hmm
it's a little bit of an anxious thing, like a mild anxious thing. But I
hmm
find if I'm just sitting there, if I'm sitting here interviewing you for this podcast and I have nothing for my hands to do, they're
Yeah.
sitting here and I'm like picking at my fingers. So,
I and
yeah.
there's truth to that, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially if you have a spot with your fingernail, if you have a hangnail or your
Yeah.
nail is like my nails peel, that'll drive me crazy. And
Yeah.
I'll just mess with it until I get it off because and it's not an anxiety thing.
Yeah.
So not multitasking in and of itself is not an anxiety thing
Mhm.
unless you are anxious and you're multitasking because you think you have to get everything done. Like
Right.
the one of the things that I think is so important is it always goes back to what you're thinking.
Yeah.
The feeling in your body, you've survived it a million times. You
Mm.
feel it, it's a normal thing. It feels exactly like excitement because it's the exact same
Yeah.
emotions and things. It's just what you're thinking about the situation.
Mm. So is a lot of it just changing your mindset around it? Is that
Mhm. Yeah,
one of the biggest things.
absolutely. And changing your mindset and just being really curious about what do I think, and saying, if that were to happen, then what? Someone would be disappointed. Okay, then what? Then
Yeah.
what would you do? Then what? And helping them get to the point where they're like, I really am afraid that this would happen, or whatever it is that it goes down to. I would be embarrassed, or I would be left out,
Mm,
or whatever it is. If I did this thing, something bad would happen. And sometimes it's so buried in there that we have to get into the place of, but what are we really afraid of here? And
mm,
that's when I can say, okay, then if we just look at that one thought, it just unravels everything else. Because, okay, so all of these behaviors that you're doing are to protect you from this one thing. And it's always something very primitive or simple. Or if
yeah.
you imagine like a caveman, if it would have killed a caveman in some way, shape, or form, that's what you're protecting yourself from.
Mm,
Yeah. Or being uncomfortable,
yeah.
like embarrassment or something. But trying to stay in the group, like we people please, because if you were a caveman and you made everybody upset, they would lock you out of the cave and you would freeze and starve. Outside of the community. Or if you did something dangerous, like where anxiety really is a beneficial thing, you fall off the cliff or get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's very primitive and very protective and very outdated. And just the system didn't get the update.
Mm. Now do you work primarily with women?
Usually, not specifically, but usually, yeah.
Okay. And how much are hormones playing a role in this? Because I'm very in tune with my cycle, and
Mm-hmm.
I definitely notice, usually for me right now, it's around, I don't know in the past, because I've just recently started really paying attention to this, but for me, it's right around my ovulation time period for
Yep.
some reason that
Mhm.
I just like everything seems heightened, and
Yep.
I'm so sensitive and things hurt my feelings more. And all I want to do is cry, and everyone's hurting my feelings. And I just feel
Mm-hmm.
like the worst feelings. And then it's for just like a day or two. It's not very long. And then I'm like, and then I can come out of it. But in the moment, I know I'm like, oh my gosh, this is hormonal and I don't know how to shut it
Yeah.
off.
Yeah,
So
I wish I could tell you how to shut it off.
you don't need to solve that for me right now, but just tell me about how our hormones affect that, because I think as women, they affect everything, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
everything. Have you found that with people you've worked with, it's been different times of their cycle too, or is it pretty commonly the same times?
I would say there are two times when it's the worst, right? We know for your first question, 100% it's tied. If we look at when girls and boys start to become anxious, yes, for little girls, like third grade, because their bodies are starting to change. And it's younger and younger now because girls are starting their periods younger.
Yeah.
For me, third grade, probably, I think I started my period in the fifth grade, but those hormones start to kick in and it feels weird and you
Yeah.
don't know what to do with it.
Ah.
And then we see it like big time with hormonal. Teenagers are
Mhm.
super anxious in general anyway. That's why they're so moody. They're anxious, they're
Mhm.
depressed, they're happy, they're sad, they're here and there and everywhere. It's testosterone, it's estrogen.
And their bodies
And
are trying to figure it out, right? Because it
right.
just
And
started
really,
and they're like, whoa.
yeah, they are programmed to fight and make babies.
Yeah.
And that is it.
Yeah.
Really. And it's again, it's that outdated thing, right? We don't want our teenagers fighting and making babies. But
Right. But it's
back in
important to
the
remember
yeah,
that
but
that's how
back
it
in the
was.
caveman days, you should just go ahead and have the baby when you're 12 because you'll be dead
Yeah.
by your 20,
Right.
right? Because they didn't live very long. So it's very tied to that. But fast forward to cycles in women. Yes, when a lot of times when you're ovulating, you get that big hormone rush because it's supposed to make you be able to go out and be like, I'm sensitive. I have all of these feelings. And a lot of them are always wrapped up in love and
Mm.
very much okay, so now I'm ovulating. This would be a really great time for me to try and increase the population of the planet. Like I have to
Oh, yeah.
reproduce. So again, stupid biology, but it goes back to that. Whereas I would say for a lot of women, it's also a few days before they start their periods.
Yeah.
And then their estrogen drops and they're getting ready to start their period. And they're like funked out.
Mm-hmm.
They're depressed, they're crying, they're anxious, and then that feeling. And then you get a few days into it and you're like, no, I feel fine.
Yeah.
Because whoop, estrogen went right back up. So when your estrogen's back up, you're like, I feel great.
Yeah.
And then so we have that, whatever is happening in the middle. What is it like? You get like a progesterone jump or stop or something like that. I forget what happens there. But so yeah, it is very tied to the up and down with your estrogen levels. And that's what makes it really hard, I think, when you get into later on down the road with perimenopause or menopause, where it's like, oh yeah, you don't really even have any of that left. And and someday it's, you didn't have any for a month. So here's a gallon of it now. So you're like, whoa.
Because it's a teenager again, right? Because then your body is trying to come off of it, but it's readjusting in different ways. So
yes, it is like the second teenagerhood. And it's wild. Like there needs to be some sort of class on this, but it's wild, but it is so much where you could be like, I don't know what just happened, but I feel this way. And it's so much like being a teenager where you are just on the opposite end of the teenager roller coaster. But it does. You can be that. And then again, we know after you have a baby, there's postpartum anxiety, and postpartum depression gets a lot of talk. And I think that postpartum anxiety is finally catching up, because for me, it was never postpartum depression.
Okay.
Ever. It was postpartum anxiety through the roof. Like at my worst days, postpartum was so much harder.
Yeah.
And it was just really because of that hormone drop, which I'm sure that was a lot of it, again, when I was in high school and college, because it's crazy. But yeah, definitely tied to that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because and it's so infuriating to know that it's happening and know that I'm sure there's things I could do about it, but it feels helpless. Like, this is my body. I don't know what to do with this. Guess we're just riding this out for the next couple days. And
that's where we are. And really, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
But you can use it, like really use it as an alarm.
Yeah.
So and I don't mean alarm as in like a bad alarm. I mean it as like a notification on your phone, like some sort of alarm on your phone to be like, hey, you feel this? When you feel this way, even though it feels really awful, that is your kind of like reminder. You are not allowed to believe your thoughts when you feel those feelings. And so if you can get to a place where I feel this, I know what it is. I do not like this feeling, but I can handle the feeling. And I remember that I'm not allowed to be critical of myself. I'm not allowed to go down the rabbit hole of Googling symptoms that I think I have. I'm not allowed to think that the guy with the side eye is trying to get me fired, whatever it was. Then you can cut the drama, and you can really cut the amount of time that you feel anxious down, because when you don't give it the attention, it's like, oh, okay, fine. And it goes away. So much faster. And it doesn't happen as frequently.
Yeah. What about, I know my mom has told me she might be like full menopause now. I don't know if she's still very menopausal, but she talks a lot about anxiety in the middle of the night. So is that something you work with a lot of people? Is just we all deal with it, I think, to some degree. She seemed to notice it a lot more during that perimenopause phase. But I even struggle with it too sometimes, where I wake up, gotta go pee or whatever at 3 a.m. and all of a sudden you're just thinking of all of the things that bring you anxiety and you can't shut it off. So have you worked with some people with that, and what tips do you have for that maybe?
Yeah, my best tip for that is the first thing that I always, if I wake up in the middle of the night and I notice that I have an anxious thought, the first thing I would always tell anybody is to remind yourself, if you have to write it on a sticky note and put it next to your bed, a tired brain is an anxious brain. Because you can't, when you're anxious, the reason that you can't believe your thoughts when you're anxious is because that rational thinking part of your brain is shut off.
Yeah.
And when you're tired, it's trying, but it's not working well. Like if you can imagine it being not really in a dream state, but similar to a dream state where I have a lot of thoughts and they're making me feel anxious. So maybe you wake up and you worry about something that you said earlier in the day, or you wake up wondering, what about this thing that I said I was going to do that I forgot? Whatever it is that you're thinking about in the middle of the night, if you can remind yourself, a tired brain is an anxious brain. And I'm going to write this down. And if I'm still worried about this when I wake up in the morning, I'll take care of it then.
Okay.
A lot of times, just that process of writing it on a piece of paper and moving it out of your head and writing it down so you
Ah,
don't forget is I'm going to deal with this first thing in the morning.
okay.
And when you wake up, you're going to be like, I barely remember writing that.
I feel that way too. I don't even write stuff down, but I'll think of these things and they feel so magnified at that time of
Yes.
night. I don't know, like you said, our brains are tired because I'm like, then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, this really isn't that big of a deal. Like, why was I not? And it'll affect me for sometimes 2 to 3 hours where I'm just tossing,
Yeah.
turning, and I cannot shut it off. I've never tried writing it down, but I am going to try to
Yeah.
do that because I think
Try
that's,
writing it down. Do you
Mhm.
ever get up out of bed? When you wake up, and let's say you wake up, you have to pee, and you come back to bed, and your brain starts up, do you ever just get up?
No. If it's been a while and I see no sign that I'm going back to sleep, but I have to get up very soon, then sometimes, but usually I'm trying to go back to sleep. So,
Yeah. And sometimes when you try to go back to sleep, it gets really difficult to go back to sleep because you're like, I can't stop thinking, I have to sleep, I have to sleep, I have to sleep. And when that pressure is there,
oh.
you won't sleep because your brain's, yes, sleep, go ahead and try it. But if you can get up and you can go to, let's say, go lay on the couch, take a
Mm.
blanket, go lay on the couch and do something like that, a lot of times you'll fall right back to sleep
Okay.
because just that move.
I'm always afraid if I do that though, then I'll be more awake, I think.
Yeah. And I think for a minute you might be, but if you're already tossing and turning in bed,
Yeah.
it's worth a shot.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
sure.
turn on the TV. I wouldn't grab your phone because that blue light will keep you awake. But I do think there's a lot of value in being able to, one, say, if I am a tired brain is an anxious brain, I'm not allowed to believe what I'm thinking right now. And then I'm going to write this down so I can handle it first thing. And if it still goes, just get up and move to the couch because sometimes moving from one place to the other, you almost leave that thought in there, leave
Mhm.
it in the other room, and then maybe you sleep on the couch for the night or something like that, or
Yeah.
you wake up an hour later and go back to bed. But if you're awake anyway, so I think that middle of the night is sometimes when we wake up. The problem, what I see sometimes with this is because the hormone that wakes you up in the morning is actually cortisol. So for people
Mm.
who, a lot of times I'll talk with people and they say, when I wake up in the morning, I'm super anxious. And that makes
Oh.
sense because the hormone that makes you feel all of those anxious feelings, or one of the hormones, is cortisol. It's also the hormone that your brain starts to produce or your body starts to produce to say, rise and shine. So
Okay.
if you are really sensitive to how your body feels and you don't know what to do with that, and you wake up and you're like, oh gosh, what is that? Why am I already anxious? It's just cortisol. So really
Mm.
being able to get very specific with people and say, hey, tell me what anxiety feels like. Let's get really descriptive. What color is it? If you were
Mm.
to use your imagination, what shape is it? What does it look like? And
Okay.
I've even done activities with people who, when they're really like, it just feels so bad, I'm like, I need you to, we walk through the whole thing. Tell me what it looks like. What shape is it? What color is? Does it move? Does it have a smell? Does it
Mm.
have a taste? Does it make a noise? And then maybe their assignment for that week is, I want you to get some paper and color it, draw it, whether color pencils, markers, I don't care. And I will have people, they'll send me a picture like, what the heck? And I've gotten everything from like wispy green smoke with fingers
Oh.
to a black blob that's covered in eyeballs to mine looked like a purple blob with black spikes coming off of it. And it's
Interesting.
so interesting what your brain will come up with. I had someone draw one that was like a giant red wave that was coming.
Oh.
And they said it doesn't make a sound and that's what makes it so scary. So
Oh.
it's really what your brain does. Some people say it smells like smoke or it feels like ice or it feels like fire. And it's just your imagination. So
Yeah.
it's not like, yes, you've hit it. This is what anxiety looks like. We don't know. But I
Yeah.
think that's one of the cool things about Inside Out too, is that they put a face to it. And
Yeah.
that was the illustrator's face, but somebody, you can do that yourself. You can
Yeah.
sit with it and be like, if I were to imagine, this was just a really cool activity I did when I was getting my coaching certifications, that one of my lab partners was actually a therapist, this was something that she did with her kids. And I was working through, my oldest was going to college. I had all of these thoughts about him going to college because of my own experience. I was like, if he's going to cry, he's going to be miserable. He's not going to know what to do. He's going to want to come home.
Oh.
And he was fine.
It was just you having
He actually
anxiety
enjoyed
for
it.
him having
He,
anxiety.
I really was. And I think it was just me going back to like really putting myself back into that. But she walked me through this and I want you to just spend some time drawing a picture of what this feeling is in your body. And I was like, I don't know what the feeling is. I don't know what the emotion was. Part of it was anxiety, but when I drew it, it's so funny. I actually saved the picture because I was like, that was a really cool activity. I sat at the table, I drew it. It looked like a pickle. It was like a green pickle, but it had on swim goggles and a cap because my kids are all swimmers.
Oh, fun.
And it was like dripping wet. And I'm sobbing coloring this because I'm so sad that he's leaving for college. It was almost like grief. Like my baby is going to college. And I was like, grief.
Yeah.
It's grief. That's all it was. And then I want you to draw it. I want you to talk with it. I had a full-on conversation with a picture of a pickle at my dinner table. And it changed everything. I'm like, oh, this is grief. I know what to do with this.
Yeah.
But when it was just a bad feeling, and so often people say, I feel anxious, but I don't know what it is. It's just anxious. It's just anxious. But it's not. Sometimes it's grief, and sometimes it's disappointment, and sometimes it's guilt, and it's jealousy, and it's shame, and it's anger, and it's love. I wouldn't have felt grief if I didn't feel love. That's in there.
Yeah.
And we just leave it in this big mess because we're like, I don't want to touch that. That's terrible. Go away.
Yeah.
But when you dig in and you're like, that's what it is, to be like, oh, I can handle that. So it's just a really fun thing that anybody can do. You could do it with your kids too, right? When they have a big emotion and they're like, I just feel bad. Draw it.
I love that.
Yeah, it's such a good way for them to sit down and actually get with it and be like, what color is it? Does it dance? What does it do?
And they probably come up with great things. Adults, I think, have a harder time with that imagination and creativity, but I bet kids.
This is not an activity I would do with an adult man. Maybe the right adult man, but the adult men that I've coached are very, let's kick this. I'm like, you need to get some colored pencils. And they'd be like, you need to find a new client.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh man. So that seems to be one of your tactics for helping people. In your bio, it mentioned that you do intentional fun type things to help combat it. So what are some other things that you can recommend or that you do with your clients?
A lot of times when people say, I don't know what to do, if I say, okay, what would you do if you knew what to do? Because one of the things that I'll notice a lot is if we get to a place where something's right under the surface, they're so close, they'll say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know why I feel this way. I don't know this. And I know we're close because I did this with my own coach where she would say, don't say you don't know. And I'll say, but I don't know. I don't know. And she'll say, yes, you do. It just doesn't want to come out. Or yes, what would you do what would you tell your sister to do? What would you tell your mom to do? What would you tell your kid to do? What would you tell your best friend to do? And be able to say that. Or my favorite thing is to say, what did you like to do when you were a little kid? If they'll say, I don't know why I feel this way, or this is a great one for anybody are you moving your body? Are you doing anything? There's nothing I like to do. I'm like, what'd you like to do when you were little? I want you to go do that. I've sent people out to play soccer. I've sent people out to go play tag, hopscotch, coloring, whatever it is they like to do. I'm like, your job this week is to just go do the thing that you like to do the most when you were a little kid. And when you can do that, you can start moving some of those feelings out, which is great for the actual physical part of it. But it also opens up that, oh my gosh, while I was playing this, I realized that I love this. And I think that part of my problem is that whatever the sticking point was, it unlodges that. But the second that somebody says, I don't know, I can tell that it's okay. Now we're close and it's right under the surface because your brain will protect you from trying to feel that or say it or go there because this is going to hurt for a second. And it's like pulling out the splinter, right? We're going to have to grab it. The splinter is going to hurt. And as soon as it's out, it doesn't hurt anymore. So it's like pulling a splinter. But a lot of times whenever we get to an I don't know, I'm like, okay, how can we make this fun? What would you tell your best friend to do? What if you were like, listen, this is what the problem is. This is what you need to do. And as soon as you say that, it would be like, oh, well, I'd tell them this. I'm like, okay, what about you?
It's so
Oh,
much easier to look at everyone else's problems and solve it for them.
it
It's our
is. But
own.
when it comes, we can't take our own advice. And that's true for,
Yeah.
that's true for me too. I'm
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
at giving advice. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what's the matter. And actually my kids would be like, what do you tell your clients to do? I'm like, shut up. I'm like, thank you. Okay, great. But I was like, gosh, dang it, you guys. But they're like, yeah. So we all need reminded, right? We all need
Yeah.
reminded that we really do know. And we just get so up in our heads sometimes. I don't know. But what would you tell someone else to do? And that's
Mm,
something that we can really do very simply with ourselves too. How can
yeah.
I make this fun? If I weren't scared of it, what would I do? Is another good
Mm,
one. And be like, what if you weren't scared? What would you do? How could you even do a tiny part of that? Because it's really difficult to feel anxious when you're out doing something silly, whether you're painting rocks or flying a kite or playing Just Dance in the living room. It's really hard to feel anxious when you're doing that
yeah.
because you're not giving the feeling and the attention.
Mm,
So let's have fun with it.
yeah. I
Yeah,
love
it just like unlodges or dislodges whatever it is that's stuck in there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what does your coaching program look like if somebody wants to use you for that?
Yeah, I coach everybody one-on-one. So
Okay.
I don't have a group or anything like that. I really love one-on-one because everybody shows up with great stories and anxiety that's just a little bit different. And I think that when we're working through some of those, if there's something that somebody's coming to me, I think we need to really figure out what's working for them and what's going to help them. And there's really some like broad thing. Anybody can get on the internet and they can say, what is a grounding technique? There's a million of them.
Yeah.
But it's finding the one that works for you or finding someone that works exactly for that person. So we do it one-on-one. And I'm like, all right, tell me your story. What would you rather have your story be? Like, how would you like to write your story? What do you want to do that you can't do right now? So we just create goals and we work towards those. And their goals are almost always about anxiety or stress or overwhelm. There's just so much on my calendar. And I just want to be able to sit down and watch movies with my kids in the evening and not feel like I have to clean my whole house. Okay, we can do that. But we always take it day by day. And it's even though we're working towards these goals at the end, it's not like every session I'm like, what do we have to do to get to your goal today? It's what is coming up for you in your life that is keeping you from having this right now. And sometimes it's hit the brakes. My mom just died. Or, oh my gosh, I had the best week ever. There is literally nothing wrong, which is great.
Yeah.
I mean, those are great coaching sessions because it's like, why was it great? What did you love about it? How would you handle this? How did you handle this differently than you would have in the past? We get to celebrate. How does this change your goal? Does it change your goal? And being able to just say, what's happening today? What feels different? And so everybody brings what they have every single session. And we talk about it over the phone. And I work with people in a 6-month container. So 6 months, 24 sessions. So it's ish, depending on if you get a couple of 5-week months in there, but it's 24 sessions.
That's once a week.
Yeah, once a week.
I'm like,
yeah,
24 divided by 6.
Yeah, it's an hour a week. And a lot of times in the beginning, everybody has my cell phone number. And in the beginning, I'm like, if you need something, if you are melting down, you text me. Let's break the bad habits now. And so maybe for the first few weeks, they'll be like, help in the middle of the week. Great. We either text or we get on a call. Sometimes people will email me, but it's just so much easier to text. And then I just noticed that usually about 3 or 4 weeks, crickets. They're like, no, I got this. So once they learn how to calm down that feeling in their body and to be like, oh, wait, yeah, I had a really anxious week, but I didn't crumble at all because I just knew that it was anxiety and it felt horrible. What do I do? And I'm like, you're doing it. We just have to, your body has to unlearn that pattern. And sometimes that takes a little bit. And so sometimes we get halfway through and they're like, let's make more goals, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's been a struggle for me in the past personally with therapy. Now, I understand that like coaches, therapists, doctors, all the things, they all need boundaries in place and you shouldn't necessarily be on call 24/7 because you will have somebody that will take advantage of that, I'm sure.
I will not answer you at 2 a.m. Yeah. Love you, but no.
Yeah. I found that for myself in the past, when I've been in those moments, I want to talk about it right then. I want to work through it right then. And then if I'm like, I don't have a therapy session until 2 weeks from now, then your feelings around it are so different by the time you get to that. So I think that's great that you for your clients. And then that's cool that it peters off eventually, because that means what you're doing.
It really does. And
Mhm.
that's how I can tell, okay, where are we? If I'm gauging, and everybody's so different, right? Some people will come in and they're like, you don't understand, it's like every single day. And other people are like, it's just this feeling that I can't shake. And, and so it's very different. Some people are going to use it like crazy. Some people won't do it one time.
Mhm.
Other people will be like, I was great. And then something awful happened in my life and I need it now. And that's okay. It's there. I have not had anybody abuse it yet.
Oh, good.
Never. It's always one of those things where I can tell that, yeah, I'm thrilled that they're willing to reach out and do it because that's why I'm here. I want to help.
Yeah.
But also, it helps them break that habit sooner. Like, you can make it through this. What do you have to believe for the next 15 minutes, 10 minutes to get through this?
Yeah.
You can do this for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I promise.
Yeah.
And then stay on the phone with me. I'll walk you through it for 10 minutes. This is not a problem. And then they're like, okay, I feel better. I'm like, okay, you got this. Text me if you need it. So every once in a while, if there's somebody just like melting, yes. But for the most part, I've never had anybody abuse it.
Okay. That's good.
But I really won't answer clients at 2 a.m. Like I got the boundaries thing down. In the past, I might have.
Yeah. You don't need to be doing that. I think even it's generous for you to even be on call all day long. That's not a lot of people do that. So I think that's really generous of you. And I'm glad no one's abusing it because.
No, they really aren't. It's been great. I would also say that if someone was, then we would have to question what was happening. Like, how was the coaching working for you, right? Coaching's certainly not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So is that pretty much all you offer then is one-on-one, 6 months and or more if people want to keep coming?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I have a lot of people that are like, let's keep going. They make new goals. They're like, oh, let's just go. And they'll start out with anxiety. I had one woman who came to me because she was terrified to walk her daughter down the aisle in her wedding. She's like, I can't do it. Like, I'm going to die. I cannot do this. And then like we finished up with her, me helping her pick like this really sparkly little bikini to be in a bodybuilding show. I'm like, remember when you were afraid to walk down an aisle? And now you're going to walk out mostly naked on a stage. Yeah, it was amazing.
That's really cool. That's got to be really
it was
cool
so fun. She's like, oh yeah, I need you to help me figure out how to do this. I'm like, I can't tell you how to lift weights, but I can tell you, I can get you to the place where you'll put on the bikini and do it. And I actually went to her first show.
Nice. Yeah.
I was like, oh no, heck yeah, I'm gonna be there.
My sister did that last year. And I went to her show and I met her coach and we talked about how a lot of that fitness journey to do those bikini shows and figure competitions and whatever is a mental, it's all mental. Of course, the weights and the eating and all of that has a lot to do with it, but it is so mental. And if you can't get over the mental hurdle, you won't make it into those shows.
Yeah. They're taping you, like you're getting taped into the bikini and stuff. I was like, she goes, I'm not kidding you. It was so embarrassing. I'm like, yeah, no, don't sign me. I'll do a lot of things, but do not sign me up for that. Like,
but she did it.
She did it. It was amazing. Yeah. So everybody comes with different things. And
that's really cool. So it can be simple things, simple. And that's a very specific thing. Like I have to walk my daughter down the aisle. I need somebody to help me through the anxiety of that. And then you guys just kept working and then got to that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I want to connect better with my wife. She wants to go on vacations. I'm afraid to fly. That was one. Yeah. So it's not like I just feel anxious and I have an anxiety disorder. It's really, I would say, life situational things. Like, I want to quit my job. I have no idea what to do. I feel so anxious because every time I go to work, I hate it. It's those kinds of things that people are just like, I hate this feeling and it's holding me back.
I love that. That's got to be so rewarding to work with people on. And I'm assuming your journey led you into wanting to do this type of work then and help others. So how long have you been doing it now?
Oh gosh, let's see. I think I've been full-time coaching for 2 years, but I crisscrossed my coaching and my teaching for 2 years as well. I think I was certified in 2019. The first year was a lot of practice, a lot of practicum stuff. So I would say 5 years, but full-time specifically for 2 years.
Nice. Yeah. Sounds like you're loving it, which I love.
I love it. It is. It actually, I read something that said a lot of people will be anxious for 11 years before they would do anything. And I'm like, that's a
Wow.
long time, 11 years. And I'm like, you please, whoever's listening to this, do not spend 30 years doing it. For the love
Yeah.
of God, don't. That's like a lot of time. But 11 is so long. Like
Yeah.
it's the faster you ask for help, whether you go to therapy or you talk to me or you talk to somebody else, the faster you ask, the easier it is to undo those habits because they're
Mhm.
just not as deep.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. So I think you have a website, right?
I do.
Website, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then of course your More Than Anxiety podcast, I'm sure has a lot of great nuggets and information in it. I will link all of that in the show notes so that if anybody's trying to reach you or get a hold of you or wants to work with you, anybody listening, check out the show notes because it'll all be there.
Yeah.
Do you have any final advice, parting words for people struggling with anxiety?
Yeah. A lot of people think that is something that you are born with and you are stuck with. And it
Mm,
is not. It is not. You do not, even if you are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, the way I was, those disorders aren't forever. It's
mm,
not a disorder like diabetes where it's you're going to have this forever. It actually can go away. And
mm,
you can still be, it's normal to be anxious as a human because it's a regular human emotion and life is crazy, but to be drowning in it is not normal. So
mm.
if you are just noticing that I don't know what to do, I just feel anxious so often, ask somebody for help because I promise you that life is so much different when you are not taking the way your body feels so seriously and you're not taking your thoughts seriously. And you can learn that and totally ditch that disorder label to
Mm.
where you don't need medicine, to where you don't need those things because you got your own back. And that's really important.
Yeah.
Everybody can feel better than they feel right now.
Mm.
Even if you don't get to the point where you're like, I have to have medicine, that's you still can feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason to stay miserable, my friends, at all. Please do not do it.
Yes, it's a lot of that is by choice, huh? And we
Yes.
don't realize
Yeah,
it, but a lot of it is our own choice to stay in that and to not
it really
figure out
is.
how to get out of it on our own because we are the only people that can do it for ourselves. No one else can
Yeah.
do it for us.
Yeah. If somebody else could have done it for me, I would have found them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And they
It's not
would be
happening.
making
Yeah.
lots and lots of money.
Yes. It would be the same as when I tell the girl who colors my hair, I'm like, if you could just find a way to reverse gray hair, you would make a bazillion dollars. And she goes, yeah. And I'm like, get on it, Brooke. Like it is
I'm
like,
a
right? Like,
hairdresser and
yeah.
my biggest thing is the cure for baldness because
Oh, yeah.
I have so many women that come to me that are losing their hair and a lot of it's different things. And a lot of the times it comes back, but not always. And especially the older we get, the thinner it gets. And there's so many vitamins out there and supplements and things like that. But I have these women that come in and they're like, Tawny, I am losing so much hair right now. How do I stop it? And I'm like, I don't have a solution right now. Maybe I need to do a little bit more research, but I've had a few of my own hair loss bouts and there's no solution. And if there was, everyone would be doing the exact same thing.
And we're
So
not.
no
Stress is huge, right? COVID,
stress.
like COVID hair loss is
Mhm.
wicked.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client who has massive amounts of hair, like thick ponytail, and she got COVID really bad. And I think she was in the hospital for a little bit and she lost probably over half her hair from it. Now it did come
Oh
back, but
gosh.
yeah. And
Yeah, but
then,
then she's got like a baby hair thing going on, which is
yeah,
always
which
fun
takes
too.
forever to grow back out.
Right.
And then, you know what I'm seeing now is hair loss with the Ozempic shots. Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
That's a huge one right now. Yeah, it's making people's hair brittle and breaking off more and then hair loss from that, but they'd rather be skinny than have hair, I think, in some cases. So yeah, that's been an interesting
Nice.
new one because COVID was new when it was a
Right.
thing and now that's the big surge we're seeing now in hair loss. So
I had
yeah.
not heard that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Not everybody. I have one client whose hair has stayed well intact. Just hope not everybody lost their hair from it, but it was a thing.
Right.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
So
Oh,
anyways,
wow.
that was a random tangent, but
It was a side tangent. That's okay. I love those.
yeah. Thank you so much, Megan. I have
Thanks
really
for
enjoyed
having
this
me.
conversation and I love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And I hope that maybe you get some clients out of this because
Thank you.
I know a lot of people with anxiety. So, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
Thank you. I
And
did.
good. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Megan. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.